Okay, hi, I'm Jane Souter, I'm Professor of Political Communication in Dublin City University, and I'm just going to do a quick lesson on what we can learn from the Irish Citizens Assemblies. But I thought, first of all, we should just chat quickly about why Citizens Assemblies. So hopefully a lot of you will have listened to Roger and why sortition, and so a lot of it are the same kind of reasons. You know, we want to think about citizens' assemblies as a way of bringing citizens back into the policy making process, to really have politicians listen to citizens and what is it that citizens want, not just in terms of wanting a new road or a new school building or sports facility, but really what do they want in terms of policy. So rather than just listening to vested interests, what is it that citizens will want? And one of the things is that this is a way to kind of protect democracy from creeping authoritarianism, to really listen to citizens. It's a way to think about what is it that citizens want. And a lot of the reason behind them actually has been when things have gone downhill. So in Ireland, for example, we first started citizens' assemblies after the Great Recession, when the IMF and the World Bank were in running our fiscal policy. And, you know, millions of people were becoming unemployed. The citizens' assemblies are often as a result of kind of demands from climate activists, from the school strikes for climate to XR and so on. So one of the good ways to catch up on it that I'd recommend is a book from the OECD called The Deliberative Wave. And it brings together hundreds of examples and really sets out different models and developments. It has good practice guidelines in there for any of you who would like to dive a little bit more deeply. But one of the key ones, and the reason I'm here with you today, is the Irish case. And internationally, it's been seen as exemplary, even as audacious and momentous. Or, Gastill has called it a democratic laboratory. It's been called an inspiration. Now, of course, it is all of these things, but also it is no panacea. So what I would say is that all of the different processes, it's all a matter of learning. It's incremental learning. We learned from the Canadians and the Dutch. Others have learned from us. We're then learning from the Scots and the French and the Europeans. And, you know, it's a big process and we're just getting there globally. But in terms of the Irish story, the very first one, the first experiment was an academic experiment that myself and other political scientists were involved with, called We the Citizens. And we really used this as a proof of concept. We brought together 100 different citizens from across Ireland, and we got them to actually talk about a type of policy where they had to make trade-offs, so tax and spending policy. And we used the report of that, where really they actually, in some circumstances, wanted greater taxation, which was an eye-opener for many of the politicians. It was a way of, they could see then the benefit. Before that, we'd been told, you couldn't listen to ordinary citizens. They'll come up with nonsense. They won't be able to make trade-offs and so on. And of course, this demonstrated that, in fact, citizens were more than capable of listening. So this resulted in the first Irish Assembly, the Convention on the Constitution. And this convention brought together 66 randomly selected citizens. So you'll remember that, the importance of random selection from when Roger talked about sortition. And then we had 33 politicians. And the reason for that was really to give the politicians a level of succour, that they could see that the citizens were really taking this seriously. They were really interrogating the experts. They were talking to each other. They were really trying to get to the heart of the different issues. There was a really wide agenda on it. We'd 8 kind of things on it. You'll see that over time we learned that isn't such a good idea. It's better to concentrate on fewer things. But in this, you'll see the 100 citizens, they were brought together. That's a room that's more often used for wedding receptions. So you'll see there's 8 citizens at each table, 4 men, 4 women. There was a facilitator there whose job it was to try to ensure norms of respect and tolerance and listening, making sure that the one loudmouth didn't dominate the whole table, that the quieter people were able to come in, and there was a note taker there and so on. And that assembly, as is well known, called for Ireland to have a referendum to change our constitution to allow for marriage equality. And that then actually did go to popular vote by the people. And as a result, Ireland became the first country in the world to legalise marriage equality by popular vote. Other countries had done it by votes in the Parliament or the Congress or whatever. So that's really what made the world and policymakers and activists and politicians and people sit up and take notice and think, well, what is going on here? Is this something that we can use in other places? And the success of that encouraged the government to go on and have a second and even a third Citizens Assembly. The second one considered issues such as abortion and climate change. The third, gender equality. And the difference here now was that instead of having the 66 citizens and 33 politicians, instead we had 100 randomly selected citizens. And the politicians set up special parliamentary committees to consider the report. And that's really important. You know, if you're going to have a Citizens Assembly, you need to think about, well, how is it going to actually link back out? How is it actually going to make a difference? How are the citizens going to see that all the work and the time, these people can spend weekends, 5 and 6 weekends, a weekend a month for months debating this. They need to be able to see that it's taken seriously afterwards. So this one went to a special parliamentary committee. It had recommended that we had another referendum, this time to legislate for much more widespread abortion access in Ireland. And again, there was a referendum. And again, the people voted to legalise abortion. And here we could see that the vote of the people, which a lot of commentators had thought was going to be pretty conservative, they thought that it might be lost. It was actually very close to the vote in the Citizen Assembly. So we could see that the vote in the Citizen Assembly and the vote among the wider public mirrored one another to some extent. And then there was another one on climate action. Now, Ireland had long been a real climate change laggard. We've got a really strong, particularly agricultural and farming lobby who just did not want changes to different kind of carbon targets that could impact the farming sector. But as a result of this, the climate assembly, the Parliament declared a climate emergency, and we've had a succession of climate bills which have gone through, which have changed things. Now, obviously, we're still not all the way there. We still haven't met all of our Paris targets, but we're on the way, which we weren't beforehand. And more recently then, we had an assembly on gender equality. And at the moment and through 2022, that's going through the Parliament again in a special committee, but we expect another referendum on gender equality. Now, I don't want to say that everything that goes through the Citizen Assembly works, because some things go in and nothing happens to them. Others are more radical, but it's certainly something that can work and has been shown to work, but rather than something that is guaranteed to work all of the time. But I think we can look at an emerging Irish model. And if you think about policy making in a really kind of simple way, you can think that there's pressure from vested interests or from lobby groups or from different industry groups for some sort of regulatory or legislative or constitutional change. And normally that would then go through the politicians and the executive and result in some sort of change. But what we see now is that in some issues, we now have a Citizen Assembly. So the Parliament will set up a Citizen Assembly to discuss a certain issue, and it'll then go back into the Parliament before it comes out. Now, so this is a very clear link between the deliberative system of the Citizen Assembly and the representative system of the Parliament and the government. There are trade-offs involved here. You know, in some ways, it would be normatively better if the Citizen Assembly were entirely independent of government, if it could be entirely bottom-up from the citizens. But there's also pragmatic reasons for thinking, well, if you have closer links in, then you might be more likely to get successful outcomes. So this is something that Ireland is still negotiating. Other countries are still negotiating. I don't think anybody has got to the ideal sweet spot yet. But it's very much something in development. And there's other Irish proposals where we're looking at, well, who's actually in it? Should we be over-representing young people? Should we be over-representing visible or other minorities and so on, just to ensure that, it's entirely equal in terms of who gets to be there. So there's lots of still debate about where we're going, but the model is emerging. And I'd be delighted if any of you are interested in following up on any of this or learning more, having a chat to me, do please drop me a line and I'd be delighted to chat. Thank you.